These chapters of Walsh that you have read for today ask three very important questions. And the first one is, why has the creation and operation of the park in Ankarana benefited outsiders more than the local people? This is a big question of both Walsh and the people living there, because it seems a bit of a contradiction since they are living there and there is so much natural bounty and beautiful things that they should be benefiting. So this is one question that he discusses in this chapter. The other question is regards the similarities between mining and ecotourism. And I think this is one of the very interesting aspects of this book, is that it takes two things that are very different from each other and asks how they are connected, or how we can look at them with an anthropological perspective as very similar in some ways. So what are some of the connections between mining and ecotourism? And the third question is, how do Ankarana sapphires and ecotourist attraction became valuable as both one of a kind and one of a kind? And here Walsh uses two expressions that are very similar to each other to highlight, a paradox there that he discusses in the three last chapters of this book, including the conclusion. So to help answer these questions, what I would like to do first is I will start by reading some of the descriptions of some vacation packages and itineraries from a travel advertisement that I picked up. And of course, I picked up this travel advertisement before the pandemic made travel almost impossible. So, and what I would like you to think about while I read this description is, which country are they referring to? It's a bit of a guessing game. Which country is this that I'm talking about? So visit this country filled with warm, friendly locals, beautiful natural wonders, incredible vistas, delicious local cuisine, and off the beaten path hikes. This tour is the best way to see a country that will leave you breathless. The second description from the travel magazine is this. This country is a gem and a hidden secret. It is as charming as it is diverse, enticing as it is unfathomable. With its crystal clear lagoons, lush forests, immense lakes, stunning beaches, it provides a traveler with endless adventure. Again, which country is this? The next country is described like this in the tourist brochure. A heaven for adventure seekers, this country boasts a dazzling array of natural wonders, colorful wildlife, and intriguing cultures. Which country could this be? And the last description of the country from the travel magazine is this. Immerse yourself in the warm island culture, awe-inspiring wildlife, and unique ecosystem. So again, think of this description from Finisterra Travel and think, which countries could they be describing? Just like the park and these natural attractions, which are one of a kind and one of a kind. So sapphire are also one of a kind, so unique and non-exchangeable, and one of a kind, so one of many gemstones and commodities that are produced and circulate in the world. And in his conclusion, if you remember, for example, he talks about another gemstone, a green garnet, that started to be mined somewhere else in Madagascar. And this really shows how, another gemstone can just simply take the place of the sapphires. And the people who have invested a lot in the sapphires, the miners, for example, they can be just left behind by the way the market goes here and there. So the first one was Nicaragua. As charming as it is diverse, enticing as it is unfathomable, crystal clear lagoons, lush cloud forests, immense lakes, stunning beaches. The second one was Jordan, warm, friendly locals, beautiful natural wonders, incredible vistas, delicious local cuisine, off the beaten path hikes. And I found it very interesting when I was looking for this description that natural wonders comes up over and over again. You can see Jordan says that it has beautiful natural wonders, but also Ecuador, the next one, says boasts a dazzling array of natural wonders. So it's again the same words that is also described for Madagascar and for Ankarana. And the last one was the Galapagos, the warm island culture, awe-inspiring wildlife, and unique ecosystem. And what is interesting is that all of these could also apply to Ankarana as well, right? And this little guessing game, these little activities can perhaps help us to understand what Walsh means when he argues that Ankarana's ecotourist attractions, like the park and the tsingis and the caves, become valuable as both one of a kind and one of a kind. If you look at these countries and their descriptions in the travel magazine, all of these countries are very different from each other. In fact, people like us in Vancouver, which is usually cold and rainy, not today, but when we are here in cold and rainy Vancouver, we might wish to travel to this country because they are so unique and so distinctive. They are one of a kind. But when they are described as tourist destinations, they also seem all to be almost the same place, or at least they are all the same kind of place. They are beautiful, awe-inspiring, again, filled with natural wonders. They have culture, they have wildlife. So they are all of the same kind. If you are a visual person, another way to think about this could be with these images. Look at these images for just a moment. Again, just like a description of a travel magazine, all of these images show very unique places. These are places that are absolutely distinctive. They are, again, one of a kind. This is why people photograph them, travel to them, perhaps hang posters of them on the walls. But if we look at these pictures, right, what are some of the things that come to our mind? When do you see pictures like these ones in a sequence? What does this remind you? For me, it reminds me a little bit of screensavers on a computer. Many computers have images like this on a screensavers. And here, this idea is not just coincidental. The idea of a screensaver actually reveals this other aspect about these places. They can all be put in a series. They can all be put in a calendar. They can all, in a sense, fit in a box with the label beautiful, unique places on its cover. Outdoor adventures or natural wonder. So they are very similar to the descriptions that we talked about a moment earlier. Again, all of these sites and all of these countries become valuable as part of a larger kind, as part of a more general category. And here, Walsh talks about this because he's interested in the paradox that this creates. So at first glance, it seems that the main value of these places we are either seeing or hearing about is their distinctiveness, their being unique. But because of the way we approach these places, we think about these places, their uniqueness is subsumed to their role as tourism attractions, as inspiring places, as natural wonders. This is largely because of the tourism industry as well as mass media. And the point that particularly interests Walsh here, again, is this paradox. How can they be both at the same time? They are both one of a kind and one of a kind. And what interests him also is not just how they are both at the same time, but also the fact that these places do not lose their attractiveness, do not lose the fact that they create wonders in visitors, even when they become part of a more generic kind, part of a more general kind. And the important question he talks about in regards to the park in Ankarana, but it's also like a wider question, is what are some consequences of this? One of the consequences is a disconnection from the actual place. Because tourists might not have a particular connection with a particular place, they have the power to decide where to travel. And I think the travel brochure shows this really nicely, how tourists can just choose from an array of amazing choices. Of course, again, not here in the pandemic, but generally, if we think of tourism. So tourists have the power to decide where to travel, while local people are in a way dependent on the tourists and their decisions. So there is definitely an asymmetrical relationship. There is a power imbalance there, or a power difference. And the conversations and encounters, that you read for today show what these asymmetrical relations actually look like in the everyday life of Ankarana. Another thing that is interesting for us here that I want to think about is the very idea of what the natural is and naturalness. Because when he describes one of a kind and one of a kind, that's another thing that really interests him. So when we think of the idea of a natural and naturalness, let's consider this first in relation to sapphires. And here in the slides, I have put different stages, so to speak, or different conditions that sapphires can be in. And on the left side, you can see sapphires in the ground, so not even yet mined, then sapphires that have been mined, then sapphires that have been cut in particular shapes. And Walsh really reminds us that it is very important which shape sapphires are cut, and that it takes a particular expertise to do that. Sapphires are also polished. Sometimes sapphires are heated to bring out better the color or the brilliance, and they can also have a treatment that he calls surface diffusion, again, to make them seem more beautiful or more shiny. Sapphires can also be manufactured in a lab. And indeed, Walsh says when sapphires are manufactured in the lab, something that is very interesting is that they are virtually identical from sapphires that are mined in the ground. Just trained gemologists, so people who actually have an expertise in gemstone, can tell a sapphire that is made in a lab and a sapphire that is in the ground. So when we look at all of these different states of sapphires or different kinds of sapphires, we could say that on one end, there is the category natural or nature. And on the other hand, we could put the category or the idea of the artificial, the manufacture, and the human-made. And now I have a question for you. If you look at these slides and the different situations of sapphires of a different condition or different sapphires, where would you put the line, the boundary, so to speak, between the natural and the manufacture? Where would you draw a line to mark what is a natural sapphire and what is a manufactured one? It is almost impossible to put a line between one stage and another to distinguish between what is natural and what is not. And the problem of thinking about it this way is a binary between what is nature and what is not nature, or human-made or artificial. Now think about it also this way. We could do the same with the park. If you think of Ankarana National Park, we could also, for the park, think of different almost stages of it being a park. So when it is not designated as a park, we could call it a wilderness, and we would put wilderness in quotation mark probably. So on one side of this continuum, we can put the wilderness, and then another different state of a park would be when it is called a park, when it is measured, it has boundaries around it, it has signs saying this is a park, it shows up on maps as a park. Another stage can be when it's protected from the miners, and the miners are actively discouraged from coming in. And then what about the dirt roads? Cutting roads into the park so that people can experience it as a park and have the ease to walk or hike in it can be another state. Having organized tours and people who guide tourists is another thing to consider. And Walsh also describes, and I find it very interesting, the way increasingly the park has things like rope ladders to go to particular viewing station or viewing platforms. And then there are like terraces like thing that help you to go over the cave in the Tsingis, which otherwise would be quite dangerous. So helping you experience the park. And here again, we could say, where do we put the line between a natural place, something that is just a wilderness, and a manufactured environment for the benefit of the tourist? Where can we put this line? Just like for sapphires, it's very difficult to put a line, but, and here this is a very important thing, for people, it does matter if they see it as a natural place or a manufactured environment. If you think back to this conversation between the drivers of the jeeps and people working for the park, in one of the roads of Mahasima, the gateway to the national park, I think this is where this conversation was, then it doesn't matter if the park is seen as just a manufactured environment or a natural place. So here we might start to unravel this binary and think that it is not useful. But on the ground, in this particular place, these categories have particular consequences and they matter. And this is why Walsh talks about it. A very important idea coming from anthropology in regards to nature is that the very category nature is culturally defined and understood. Although we defined nature as what is before or what stands apart from culture and human activity, we can actually only understand and define nature in very particularly socially acquired ways. And the glaciers we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, is here a good example. As Julie Cruikshank shows in her book, Do Glaciers Listen, there are different ways of understanding glaciers, and different people might understand glaciers in different ways. Similarly, there are different ways to understand what a forest is or what a park is and what the purpose of this park is, what it is for. Here, for example, you have 4 different images of parks. They are all parks, but it's not just that they look differently because they are in different places. They also show a different way of thinking about what a park entails, what the function of a park is, and who might use that park. In North America, for example, the idea of parks, such as regional park or national park especially, was shaped by John Moore, who was an advocate of parks, but also had very particular ideas of what a park should look like and be for. And John Moore's understanding of a park was as a beautiful and almost spiritual place, something like a natural cathedral, and as such that needs to be left untouched. This, however, according to Julie Cruikshank, has often resulted in Indigenous people being prohibited from using resources in the park, even when it was or it is in their traditional territories. Here, another point that I want to make, and I want to go back to Walsh, is that here we are talking about cultural differences in understanding park, but as Walsh makes it very clear, it is not enough to talk about cultural difference in understanding park. So it is not enough to know that there are different ways of understanding and relating to the environment, but it's also always crucial to ask what is the history and the context of particular ideas about the environment and particular practices. Also, which consequences does it have for a particular group of people? If we're talking about a park, like Walsh does in relation to the park of Ankarana, is in which ways has a park been constituted? What is the history of making a park? What are the ideas underlying that? And who was involved in its decision? Which consequences does it have? So that has always has to be considered. And this is also a question of access, a question of disparity and of inequality. Remember that Walsh, when thinking about how people in Ankarana sees perhaps the park and the environment around there and the tourists that come to visit it, Walsh highlights how people say, well, these tourists come and enjoy the park because they can. The difference between Malagasy people in Ankarana and tourists is that the tourists have money and access to resources that local people might not. They also have vacations and holidays. That is another answer that Walsh was given by the people there. So again, we have to really think about the history of idea and also their context.